In this lesson, we're going to go over how to take your network security to the next level with the defense in-depth strategy. First, let's review one of the most important principles in network security, the principle of least privilege. This is just the idea that a user's access rights should be limited to only what's necessary for their job. This is also true for processes and systems. Limiting rights limits potential harm both from misinformed and malicious actors. Many network attacks aim for privilege escalation in order to access sensitive data systems. If only those users who need access to those systems have permissions for them, you've greatly reduced the number of accounts that could be used against you right off the bat. It's important to accurately evaluate each user's needs when applying this principle, and then to reevaluate annually or whenever a user's role changes. Also, remember to revoke all privileges when offboarding employees. One way to apply the principle of least privilege is with role-based access control, or RBAC, which limits access levels by assigning permissions and rights based on a user's actual role on the network. This helps you narrow down exactly what is or isn't enough for a user to complete their responsibilities. With RBAC, you can create role groups and just assign or unassign users to them as needed. You can also assign multiple permissions to a role. RBAC assigns permissions to operations, which is different than access control lists, which assign permissions to objects. For example, you could assign specific access level permissions for the role of a contractor. Each contractor that works for the company is assigned to that group, and then you assign rights for everything that's needed for human resources and so on. In this way, contractors would never have to access HR resources because they're not assigned to the HR role. Now that we've reviewed the principle of least privilege and role-based access controls, let's apply these principles to a defense in-depth strategy. Defense in-depth is a network security strategy based on implementing multiple security layers to provide a more robust defense. First, there's network access control, or NAC. Networks today have a large variety of devices that are constantly trying to connect to them. Not only are there multiple device types such as laptops, tablets, phones, and IoT devices, but users are also accessing networks from all over the world now. All of this variety obviously creates a security challenge. Through a NAC system, devices can be checked for security compliance and assigned least privilege access based on the role or on the device. There are NAC products available that authenticate and authorize user requests based on your predefined policies. NAC systems work through defined controls in the central control system to discover all currently connected devices and categorize them. You can also program NAC to block devices with MAC addresses based on a deny list or certain behaviors. Let's look at an example. Steve wants to log onto his work network from his laptop while on vacation. His network NAC system requires that all devices that connect have up-to-date anti-malware software and certain system requirements. Steve's laptop doesn't meet these requirements, so his access is denied. Steve updates his system and tries again. He's allowed access and, based on his user identity, is granted the same privileges he has with his in-house workstation because his user identity is assigned to a role. Those role privileges now apply to any device Steve uses on the network. Now let's look at network segmentation enforcement. There are several ways you can enforce network segmentation. Using a firewall at a segment boundary is one. Segments can be created through VLANs or through physical LANs as well. You can also segment networks through ACLs, which are sets of rules that tell routers and switches which kind of traffic is allowed to travel through the segment and what it can do while there. Network segmentation also protects sensitive areas. It can be challenging to initially segment your network, but besides the security benefits it provides, it can also improve traffic performance and help with regulatory compliance requirements. For example, there might be regulations on how company money is to be processed, and you could segment all of the financial systems into their own segment. Then only the affected segment would need to meet the compliance requirements and not everything else. Another component in a strong administrative defense is implementing separation of duties, or SOD policies. This has many applications throughout an organization, but let's look at a specific example. Jim is the system security administrator. Cynthia is a new employee with specific entry-level tasks. She's not given the same permissions that Jim has for creating, updating, or deleting user accounts. His administrative activities in managing the accounts is monitored by Julie, who checks the logs for any unusual activity. Cynthia is separated from any access to the user accounts, and Jim and Julie are both involved in managing the accounts, creating separation and checks and balances. Now, a proactive layer to your defense in depth may include a honeypot, which is basically a baited trap for attackers. It consists of a dummy computer system that's made to look like an organization's legitimate system, including data and applications. The dummy system is made with vulnerabilities designed to attract attackers. This is done to both lead the attacker away from the authentic system and to draw them into a controlled environment. Once they're in the honeypot, their actions can be monitored. This helps you find out which tools and tactics the attacker is using, which is valuable in knowing where to allocate your resources for your defense plan. A final concept you should understand combines many of the concepts we've discussed in this lesson. It is called zero trust. To implement zero trust architecture, you identify your sensitive data and all possible routes to it, and then you segment the network and apply security controls, including lateral movement authentication. It's also important to periodically monitor traffic to evaluate your security policy's effectiveness. That's it for this lesson. In this lesson, we looked at the principle of least privilege and role-based access control to limit a user's opportunity to do harm. Then we looked at a defense in-depth strategy and 4 common components to a layered security approach. These include network access controls, network segmentation, separation of duties, and honeypots. We finished by discussing how important a zero-trust approach is to network security. Combining each of these security components will help you protect your network from without and from within.